to look at doing a large mass at Mars, landing vehicles to do multiple sample returns to Earth using the Ares 5 launch. I'll just quickly show you some of the highlights of that. Packed a lot of mass to an Ares 5, send it to Mars. You can do the sample return in a single mission. And the sample return is key because it's a logical intersection between the two Mars programs. And I think that we should focus on that within the Mars community, push hard for sample return. Why? First, it's got enormous scientific value. The level of analysis we can do here on Earth with return samples is enormous compared to what we can do in situ. It's directly relevant for scientific preparation for human exploration. If we're going to land on a place on Mars and build a base, it'd be nice to have a sample of the dirt in advance, so we don't have the sort of surprises we had with Phoenix, as we saw in the earlier talk, where the dirt didn't behave the way we think proper dirt should behave. Right? So you go to Mars with all this equipment to move the dirt doesn't do what you want it to do, you're in trouble. So it's almost a operational requirement to get a sample return from the site where you're going to put the base, as well as the safety issues. Perchlorate, for example, big surprise from Viking, as you heard about. Well, perchlorate on Mars is at 1%. Just to put that in context, DOD sites, if the perchlorate in the groundwater is above 26 parts per billion, it becomes a cleanup site. Well, 1% is larger than 26 parts per billion. Even I can do that now. Well, what are the implications of that? And what else? What other surprises are in the chemistry of the soil? So a sample return is going to be driven by scientific site selection and safety requirements for human building. And of course, it's testing technology. Like I said, it's the return. We've got to ascent stages on Mars. We've got to have large aeroshells, entry systems, and so on. We might as well test them out on sample return. The next key part I think we need to focus on is getting human exploration out beyond the moon. And the natural target for that are near-Earth objects where we can do small missions that get us out beyond the moon, get us out into deep space, into deep water, without waiting for the development of significant hardware that would be required if we made that a mission, say, directly to Mars. Here, for example, is a 150-day mission to a small object that was part of, again, a constellation-supported study looking at using constellation hardware for near-Earth object missions. Here's a table of possible targets put together by Mal Lacan and Tom Meyer. Possible targets, when you could go there, how long missions would be. These are fairly short missions. They don't tax our capability to do life support. They don't tax the technology development. You don't need to develop a lander and ascent stage. These are not landing missions, it's really docking missions. Here's a picture of the Orion CEV to scale with a typical target object on this list. And these are missions that also resonate with the public. I get a lot of calls, sometimes from my family, saying, well, what are you doing to save the Earth from killer asteroids? And I said, well, I just got up a few minutes ago. I'll get right on it. It's very easy to explain to people that NASA needs to be able to demonstrate the capability to go visit near-Earth objects. Not that any of them is on its way to us now, but we want to have that capability demonstrated. And it would test out our ability to fly beyond Earth system. Test out the startup. And it's a key step in getting ready to go to Mars. Here's another image of a large round, and there's the some big ones out there. Third component, I think, that's necessary for preparing for long-term base on Mars, having a long-term base on the moon. Here is the current NASA plan for a base on the edge of the crater. You get a sense of the size here by noting that these are football fields put down for scale, 100 football fields. It's the standard unit now that we're using. We decided feet are not good, meters are not good, so everything is now done in units of football fields. So maybe if we join the ESO, there'll be soccer fields. It's Australian rules football. And here's what a base might look like. Let me just go to, this slide doesn't want to show. I want to go to the point, why the moon? Why some say the moon? I think you should go to the moon to stay. Often you hear people say, well, we got to go to the moon and learn something and then leave, and we make sure to have an exit strategy. I think that's the wrong approach. We don't need an exit strategy. We need to have a permanent strategy. The hard thing to do is not to go, it's to stay, both for Mars and the moon. We know how to go to the moon. What we haven't done is stay there. And we know how to go to Mars now. We don't know how to stay there. My point is we need to learn how to stay. We're going to learn how to stay on the moon. We also will learn how to do things that will prepare us for Mars. It's not a literal preparation. The goal of the moon base should be a goal. The moon base should be a goal in itself. I can't imagine that we can consider ourselves a spacefaring civilization if we don't have a base on our nearest neighbor, just like we have bases in Antarctica. Not that I personally would be interested in going to this base. That's not my science. But there's lots of people who find rocks interesting. They can go. And this brings me to the philosophical point. I grew up on Star Trek, the original series, of course, and I was always enamored by the to boldly go. But I realized that we got the wrong verb. The verb that we need is not to go. Going is easy. The verb we need is stay. The challenge of space is not to go, it's to stay. It's time for a change of verb. We need to boldly stay. If you look at what we've done in space, this whole list of things, they've come and gone. Getting there was easy. Making them stay was hard. They're all, well, here's the last Saturn V parked in front of the lawn. There's the Apollo astronauts. There's Skylab, near. Getting them up there was relatively easy. Having them stay has been impossible. NASA's got a tradition of thinking that missions have or projects have a 5-10-year lifetime, and then that's it. Throw them away and do something else. So yes, we could go to Mars. There's lots of designs that show we could go to Mars, but we're not ready to stay on Mars. We'll end up doing what we've done before. Boldly go and then stop and come back, and that's it. What I want to say is we need to boldly stay. How do we do that? Well, an example of the one place where we have learned to stay, I think, and is a good model that we want to apply to Mars, is the Antarctic. South Pole Station, shown here, has been operating for 50 years, continuously. It's not a settlement. There's no maternity wards or elementary schools in South Pole. But there have been Americans in this space for 50 years, and last year, we did the ribbon cutting ceremony on the new station, shown here, and it has a 30-year lifetime, design lifetime. So 50 years in the past, 30 years in the future, that's an 80-year window on South Pole. That's what I mean by staying. So it was operated for 50 years, mandated by national interest, geopolitical interest. It's a government-owned facility, obviously, but it's operated by contractor. Keep the cost down. It was originally operated by the Navy when it was first put in. It's now operated by Raytheon Polar Services. Science-driven research. Although it's mandated by the government, by national interest and geopolitical interactions with the Antarctic Treaty, what we do there is only science. Science and only science. It's completely science-driven with peer-reviewed proposal selection, and there's enormous competition to do science there. And after 50 years, Antarctica is still interesting. I predict that after 50 years, the moon would still be interesting. After 100 years, Mars would still be interesting. These are natural places with natural complexity waiting to be discovered. There will be a lot of interesting discoveries on the moon and on Mars. On the moon, they will deal with the rocks and geology and history of the solar system. That's great science. On Mars, they'll deal with searching for evidence of life, as I showed you earlier. In my view, that's even more interesting science. So what do we have to learn on the moon? We have to learn how to operate a base for years on end, in terms of technology, in terms of human factors, in terms of life support, in terms of operation. The most important lesson we have to learn on the moon is how to transition from an exploration base, which may take an enormous fraction of NASA's budget, to a mature base, which becomes a small part of the overall budget. a moon base should be operated in perpetuity